Are 8-bound and auto-include in your World Eaters competitive list? Should you be using more Terminators or more Berserkers to be the most competitive in the Warhammer 40K universe with World Eaters? Today, we're going to find out with this strategy session. It's going to be based on 8-bound datasheet and the Exalted Eightbound datasheet, where we're going to do a comparison of stratagems to every datasheet and the blessings rolls compared to every datasheet as well. I'm going to tell you exactly what my tips and tricks are for you to be the best with 8-bound, or would the blood god not bless you? I know for me, the nails are biting. Stay tuned. Back, everyone, and this is Ops episode 19. So I wanted to start off with the 8-bound data sheet with the World Eaters Army rule, which gives you the Blessings of Corn ability, right? And it allows you to take 2 of those when you do the Blessings of Corn roll. You can get an additional one later on during that battle round in the fight phase or right after the fight phase if you've killed a unit, and we'll talk about that a little bit later via a stratagem. But just with this and the army rules itself, let me break down the data sheet for those of you who are newer to World Eaters. You have a 9-inch movement right now. Toughness 6, 3 plus save, 3 wounds each, leadership 6, OC of 1. You do a Blessings of Corn roll where you might take the Rage Fueled Invigoration. You're going to go up to 11-inch movement. A lot of people like to combine that with the Unbridled Bloodlust, which allows the unit to move 2 inches, plus the Unbridled Bloodlust allows you to charge in a turn in which it advanced, right? There are ways also that we're going to talk about during the stratagem section where you can get an auto advance of 6. So you'll end up moving 17 inches with that type of capability, or if you roll a 6, right, 11 plus 6 is going to be 17. So you can get out there very fast. And that's not to mention, right, they have the core ability Scout 6, which means theoretically from your deployment zone, if you get first turn, if it's advantageous for you, right, these are things that a smart World Eaters player may not do 90% of the time, is smack into their opponent's deployment zone turn 1. But if you catch your opponent off guard and you have the ability to tag a unit very quickly, or your opponent thought that maybe you weren't going to smack them hard enough in order to destroy that unit, they're going to quickly regret those thoughts, right? Because you're going to be able to move 23 inches right into their area. Most deployment zones are only 20 inches. So you're going to get in there very, very fast. All right. And you have the 8-bound eviscerators. So if on a 3-man unit, you're going to have 6 attacks, each eviscerator, each model for 8-bound. On the charge, you're going to get +1 strength, +1 attack, right? So you're going to go up to 7 attacks, each eviscerator wielding 8-bound model. So if you have 2 of them, you're going to go up to 14 attacks, strength 6, because you're going to go up +1, -2 AP, 2 damage flat, hitting on 3s, which is already a lot of attacks, right? That's 14 attacks just by having 2 guys with eviscerators. Not to mention you have your champion who has 5 attacks on the charge, hitting on 3, strength 10, AP 2, 3 damage flat, which is really one of those gaping holes that we have in our army where we don't have a lot of infantry units that have flat 3 damage. And it's really important, especially when you're going against models or armies that have -1 damage, things like that, like Catans and Dreadnoughts usually are -1 damage, right? So you'll still be able to apply 2 damage to that unit as opposed to the eviscerators only doing 1 damage. But the amount of eviscerator attacks can potentially kill at 8 wounds, old dreadnought, things like that. It all depends exactly what you're running into. Also, let's continue on with the blessings of corn, where we're combining them with the 8 bound unit, right? So you have martial excellence as well, which is really big. You probably don't want to do this first turn, really ever, right? Unless you're getting stuck in there, or they infiltrated some units that are very close to you, and you just want to take care of them very quickly. And you can either just do the unbridled bloodlust to do the advancing charge, or you can do the rage fueled invigoration where you can get the +2 movement. Whichever one suits you best, and whatever, obviously, what you rolled on that blessings roll. But you can combine it with the sustained hits off of the martial excellence, right? So having sustained hits on this unit that already has 19 attacks, 14 for the 2 eviscerator models, and then an additional 5 for the lacerator, you have 17 attacks. Stacking that up with sustained hits on sixes, high probability you're going to get around 19 to 22 additional hits in there as well, right? There are other ways where you can make this a lot more efficient because you're only hitting on threes. If you get Angron around there, right, within 6 inches in the charge phase, Angron can state that units and models around 6 inches of his aura can do full rerolls to hit. And because 8 bound innately already have reroll ones to wounds, right? And or if you're smacking a unit that's a half strength, you get full reroll for wounds, right? But if you don't, you get the full rerolls to hit from Angron with sustained hits. So if you want to, you're feeling lucky and you're feeling like the Blood God has you in its favor, you can actually re-roll a couple additional dice and say, "Hey, I'm just going to try my luck to get more sustained hits." Re-roll those dice and try to get more hits in. I've seen it where potentially you can get maybe 23. Sky's the limit, depends on how many sixes you're rolling. And then on top of that, you're re-rolling ones to wound. It can get very vicious very fast. Also, you have total carnage, right? Which gives you the ability on a 4 up to fight on death. Obviously, you could not have fought already. So this is more of a defensive ability for you to use once you're getting hit from your enemy unit, right? Maybe um, they're going to hit you and they're close combat specialist unit as well. You want to make sure that you hit them in return. Make sure you proc that, right? So then you can fight on death on a 4 up. Usually doesn't work very well for me, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to work well for you, right? The Blood God might be in your favor and allow you to roll a lot more 4 ups than it does for me. Also, I haven't seen much use with Warp Blades when it comes to World Eaters. Usually you have Chain Fist on Exalted Eightbound to take care of all that. But Warp Blades can be pretty good for this unit as well, especially if you're punching up to something like a Dreadnought unit or a vehicle, things like that, where Warp Blades give you the ability to get lethal hits as well. So let's say, for example, you stack the sustained hits and lethal hits on top of each other. It can get very gnarly. You start getting a lot of things really going into and surpassing the wound stage, right? And also you being able to reroll ones to wounds with the sustained hits from the 8 bound unit. You can get a lot of wounds into that unit. Around 19 attacks, if you get sustained hits, you're probably going to hit about 20 times. Couple failures if you don't have Angron around. If you have Angron around, you're probably going to get around 22 to 24 hits in there. Also, if you combine that with the Warp Blades, you're probably going to get 4 to 6 of them to actually be lethal hits on there as well. So then you're automatically going to already wound 4 to 6 of them. Then you're going to have the remaining attacks out of the 24, let's say 24, right? You have 18. potentially wounding most things on threes. Might have 3 to 4 1s in there as well, so you're going to re-roll those. And most likely, you're going to end up wounding around 12 times. So you already have that 4 to 6 that you're going to wound from the lethal hits. You're going to wound about 12 times just from the regular rolls to wound, right? So you're going to have a combination of about 18 wounds going into most infantry units. That's 9 times out of 10 times is going to wipe a 5-man squad of anything. It can really put a big dent into a lot of units. It can potentially kill a dreadnought. It can kill um, some Terminators, maybe 3 to 5 Terminators as well, right? You'll definitely kill a lot of Space Marines that don't have invols, things like that. Especially making them minus 2, they're only going to save on 5-ups. So it depends. It really depends, but it can be super efficient and super good for you. Going on to the next one. So the Exalted Eightbound, I have seen that it has higher efficacy between the two units. That doesn't mean that my opinion means that these are the ultimate go-to, right? But they are pretty amazing. Eightbound are amazing by themselves. Exalted Eightbound, I think, are a little bit better. They don't have the Auto Scout 6, but you can take Lord Invocatus to help you out with that. A lot of people also don't remember that they have the Deep Strike ability and the Feel No Pain 6-up ability. So, talking about the Blessings of Corn roll, again, like what we're talking about with the A-Bound, once you do that Wrathful Devotion, it's +1 to your Feel No Pain rolls. So now they have a 5+ invulnerable save and a 5-up Feel No Pain. They become really resilient, very strong, hard to remove from the tabletop. As a reminder, they have 9-inch movement, just like what we're talking about with A-Bound. They share the same stats, they just have different abilities, different weapons. So 11-inch movement, you can do a stratagem to auto advance 6 inches and then do the unbridled bloodlust so you can advance and charge, right? And make your life a lot easier trying to get stuck in. Also, you have the 8-bound chain fist, which is strength 14 and strength 15 on a charge because of your army rules. -3 AP, 2 damage flat. Now, they're only 3 attacks each, 4 attacks on a charge, but they're super helpful. You can really tell in the game that it's really easy to wound things on twos, right? There's even a stratagem that's +1 to wound against vehicles, character units, and monsters, right? So you can wound a knight on twos with this unit right here if you have nothing but chain fist. Usually, most people take the um, for the regular models, they have to take the chain fist and eviscerator, so you have the ability to use both of them. But if I'm running into a Imperial Knight or a Chaos Knight, I'm going to hit them with Chain Fist, try to wound them on twos, things like that. Hopefully, the 8-bound is around there to allow us to reroll ones as well, so we can make sure and ensure that we wound everything on twos. Not a lot of people use the Chain Glaives. That's not to say that Chain Glaives are trash, but Chain Glaives do hit on twos. They do have 8 attacks, 9 attacks with the charge, right? Strength 9, AP 3, 1 damage. So if you have a unit of 6 of them, right? 54 attacks just with 6 guys, AP 3, 1 damage. I mean, attrition, right? You're throwing all those dice out there. You're going to be able to do a lot to those units, depending on what it might be. Multi wounded units, you might be able to kill an entire 10-man squad. Seriously, especially AP3. You're talking about Space Marines saving on sixes as opposed to fives from the AP2. And if you have Martial Excellence, right, procced it in there with Warp Blades, so if you have those combined together, you're going to have lethal hits and sustained hits out of 54 attacks. And let's say you have Angron on top of that to stack it up. This can get very nasty very fast. right? Because out of 54, you're going to roll at least 8 6s. So that means those 8 6s are going to be lethal hits. They're going to auto pass the wounding stage, right? And then if you have the other 8 bound around that allows you to reroll wounds of 1, you're going to be a lot more efficient when you're wounding. So you're going to hit about 60 times, 64 times with sustained hits. You're going to get stuck in there with rerolling ones as well to wound, right? If the other 8 bound unit is around. If you have Angron, he's going to help you out with the reroll to hits. So you're going to make sure that you're hitting at least 50 of those hits. Put 50 hits at 1 damage against a 10-man squad of Space Marines. It's nigh impossible to not delete that entire unit, right? So Chain Glaives can be very strong. Now, I like to take the paired 8 bound Chain Fist on the champions because they're twin linked, right? So I don't need the 8 bound around to allow me to reroll ones. Obviously, it doesn't affect the remainder of the models in the unit, but it helps out your champion. He also has 5 attacks. So if you go with a champion that has just a chain fist and the eviscerator kitted out like the other models, you're only going to get 4 attacks on the charge. I like the ability to have more attacks regardless what weapon it is, specifically when it comes to the chain fist. So you're going to have 6 attacks on the charge on the champion. That is very brutal. That are twin linked as well. Strength 14 that goes up to strength 15. AP 3, 2 damage flat. So this unit can put a lot of these blessings into use. The warp blades, you really don't need most of the time. I mean, it can help you with the chain glaives, but when you have chain fists, you really don't need the warp blades. Most of the time, you're already wounding things on 2s. You can use it if you have all of those combos procted to ensure, right? Try it out. Let me know how it went for you in your games. I've never actually done it with this unit at all. I don't think I've actually tried it even one time because they're already strength 15 on the charge, right? And if it's something that I'm hitting that's very big, like Imperial Knights, or if I'm hitting a monster unit or a vehicle, I'm just gonna pop that stratagem 1 CP and +1 to it, right? Make my life a lot easier. And with the twin linked chain fist on the champion, he's gonna be able to reroll any failures in the wound step. Proc that with so I usually take procting with sustained hits and maybe a feel no pain. It's usually what I'm taking, right? Sustained hits and feel no pain, so I can have some resiliency where you hit me in return and I'm going to be able to survive those attacks as well. So it all depends what you want to do. You got to make sure that it's cohesive with whatever army you're playing against, right? Make sure that you're using it appropriately, using the right blessings of Khorne for the right situation. Make sure to execute those combats efficiently. All right. And then we're going to go on to the next one. All right, so here is what I was talking about with a couple of the stratagems, and we're going to walk through every data sheet with these particular stratagems on this page. All right, so this is the regular 8 bound. We have first up the Gory Massacre stratagem, right? So this one, rarely do most people use this one. I think I've maybe used it a handful of times throughout all of my games with World Eaters, and I've had close to maybe 10,000 hours with World Eaters, a couple hundred games. Well, almost 100 games, not a couple hundred, but almost 100 games. But this one is in your opponent's next command phase. Each enemy unit within 6 inches of your unit must take a battle shock test. If the unit taking the test is below half strength, subtract 1 from the test. Enemy units affected by this stratagem do not take any of the other battle shock tests in the same phase. Right? So this needs to be used properly, right? And I know a lot of people look at it and they're like, well, When do I actually use this? This is very good late game. Okay, just so you're aware, you know when to use this. This is why a lot of people don't use it. It's best used late game, right? When you're trying to stop people from actually holding an objective, you want to make them OC zero. You want to make them fail that. And the reason that it's more towards the late game play is that usually those units are below half strength, so you want to subtract that -1 from their test. So it makes it a little bit easier to do that. But that's usually when the Gory Massacre is used. It gives you the ability to take that objective marker from them because 8 bound only have an OC of 1. And if you have a 3 model unit, you're only OC 3. Most of the time, you're not going to beat out and OC the things that you're trying to take it away from. Everything is usually battle line or things that have OC2. So they're usually going to have more than you, especially if they're vehicles, dreadnoughts, monsters, things like that. They're usually going to have more OC than you. So this is the opportunity of a lifetime when you're doing late game, or you can use it during the game as well. But most times that I have used it have been late game, so I can get that -1. I have used it a couple times, like turn one or mid game, where I'll try to make them do that battle test, battle shock test, and try to take that objective marker from them. It has worked on me maybe 50% of the time, usually a little bit less than that, but pretty efficient if you know when to use it and how to use it and what to use it against. All right. So that's just a little bit of a strategy on how to use the Gory Massacre stratagem. For the Skull Throne, obviously, this is the one that we were talking about previously, where for the Skull Throne, melee attacks, right, that target anything that's a character vehicle, add 1 to the wound roll. That's very good. You want to make sure that you use this against knights, use this against characters, units, use this against monsters, things like that. That even the chain fist can't wound on twos, right? And you can make their lives a lot easier with this. Also, with your regular 8 bound unit, right? Since we're talking about the 8 bound unit here, that is very helpful for them. So you can see this being used a lot more often with the 8 bound unit for the Skull Throne because it gives them the ability to wound them more efficiently and actually use their beacons of rage aura ability where they're going in there and wounding potentially on twos, right, with all of their attacks. So it really helps them out trying to do all that. Also, for the Blood God is another one that I was talking about previously in the fight phase, just after World Eater's unit from your army destroys an enemy unit, right? So it only works in the fight phase, and most things for us only work in the fight phase. As you can see, these 4 stratagems only work in the fight phase. So this is yet another one for the Blood God. But this gives you the ability to activate 1 blessing of Corn, another ability. So for those armies or those players that usually have that +2 movement and advance in charge, things like that, right? This is great to throw on some Feel No Pain because you know that your opponent is going to get a turn as well. And you have to ensure that you're going to have the ability to withstand all of those attacks and live through another round because we are a very elite army. We don't have a lot of models unless you're playing with a bunch of berserkers. But since we're talking about 8 bound and Exalted 8 bound today, you're going to have more of an elite army, less model count than most players that you're playing against. So you want to ensure that you have that survivability. Or you want to put sustained hits on something, right? I usually use it where I might use it on one unit that I know that I'm going to kill, right? And I'll start with that unit first. Maybe Angron. So I'll use it just after Angron has killed something because I know Angron is going to definitely kill that unit that I'm fighting into, like a vehicle, lancer, things like that, right? And then I'll use it to do sustained hits to help out the rest of my army, like the 8 bound, to make sure that they get that sustained hits and extra hits because they already have 19 if you're running with 2 eviscerators and lacerators. And with sustained hits, you're going to get a whole lot more of attacks, right? So that really helps out. I use that quite often in combination like that. I like to use that 1 CP to do that and make sure that everything else in my army is hitting very hard with a bunch of extra attacks from the sustained hits. All right. And then we have the last stratagem on this page, which is Corn Cares Not. In the fight phase, just after an enemy unit was selected, his targets one world eater's unit from your army that was selected as the target of one or more of the enemy unit's attacks until the end of the phase. Each time an attack targets your unit, subtract 1 from the damage characteristic of that attack. So as you can see, this is the only stratagem that we have. And I already know the other stratagem, so I know this is the only stratagem that we have. This is actually 2 CP, 2 command points. But it's very strong. It can only be used in the fight phase, and that's when you're selected. So you don't have to do that at the beginning of the fight phase, which is really, really good. So you don't have to just use it on the unit in the beginning of the fight phase, and then you don't end up getting attacked or someone doesn't fight you. It goes in a whole different direction, and maybe you could have used that 2 CP for that unit to just interrupt instead. You get to know, right, when you're going to get attacked, and you can use this. So it's very strong, very, very strong. I've used it on orc knobs, 10 unit of knobs, things like that. It renders them almost completely useless, especially if you have a fat 6 pack of 8 bound. They're not going to kill the entire 8 bound unit. They're just not going to do it at 1 damage, right? Especially if you have the Feel No Pain, Corn of Blessing, right, up, and you have the ability to get some Feel No Pains out of that. That's also 18 wounds in that unit. So they usually get like 40 attacks, hitting on threes, even with the war boss. So they're probably going to hit 28 times, and they're only strength 10, so they're going to wound on threes. So potentially wounding you like 20 times unless they're dice spike, really, right? So you're going to get 20 armor saves. You're not going to fail all 20 of them, even if you end up failing just 17 of them. You're going to have 1 guy left on 1 wound, right? So you have the ability, sustainability with all that. With Feel No Pain is going to help you a lot as well if you take that blessing. So this is a lot of amazing stratagems that you can combine with your 8 bound. And as we previously talked about the army rules, abilities, or the blessing rolls, you can stack a lot of these things and ensure you're either being extra resilient or taking away objective markers from your opponents, or you're being ultra offensive where you're using for the skull throne and ensuring that you're killing those units, making it +1 to wound on those particular units, right? The character, vehicle, and monster units. That also includes, because it says character unit, that also includes all the models that that character is attached to. All right. So very strong, great stratagems. I actually love our stratagems very much. All right, here's the Exalted Eightbound with the first 4 sets of stratagems, right? So this unit right here with the Gory Massacre can be a little bit more advantageous for you because they have the innate ability of overwhelming wrath. Each time a unit within 6 inches of this unit selected to fall back, that unit must take a leadership test. And if the test has failed, that unit must remain stationary this phase, right? So you stack that with Gory Massacre. Now you're trying to make sure that they're doing multiple tests, one being a battle shock test, another one being a leadership test, which you can stack together in one phase. So Gory Massacre, subtracting 1 from that test will make sure that the Exalted Eightbound take that objective marker. They're usually going to delete most things that they're hitting because they're going to be wounding on 2s most of the time. And if you're not, unlike the regular 8 bound, The Exalted Eightbound are strength 15 on a charge, right? So you combine that with for the Skull Throne, and any character unit, any monster unit or vehicle unit, add 1 to the wound roll. So you're going to wound everything on 2s. Just about everything in the game. If not everything in the game, right? Unless it's some Forge World craziness like a Warhound Titan or something like that, right? But even then, you're going to have the ability to wound everything on 2s with your champion. If you're rocking the paired 8-bound chain fists that are twin linked, you're going to be able to re-roll all of those ones that you roll with him. Obviously, not with the rest of the unit, but with him, you will be able to. Right, so and that's a lot of attacks, especially if you have a fat pack of 6 Exalted 8-bound with Chain Fist, and the champion has the paired Chain Fist. Right, that is a lot of attacks. You're actually going to have 26 attacks, right? Because 4 attacks on a charge times 5 dudes is 20 attacks plus the 6 from the paired 8-bound Chain Fist. So you're going to have 26 attacks, 6 of them being re-rollable in the wounds phase. Or two wound roll rather. So very strong, especially if you're wounding on 2s for the Skull Throne. This is usually and predominantly used for this unit right here, or Angron and things like that. But with the Exalted 8-bound unit for the Skull Throne is amazing. It makes life a lot easier, and it ensures that you're going to be very offensive and wound that unit on 2s. All right. So if you want to kill something, you want to kill that Keeper of Secrets, that Great Unclean one, because even the Great Unclean one, I want to say it's toughness 13. You're still wounding it on 2s. And he's very, very hard to kill, especially if he has that enhancement where it's a 4 Feel No Pain. Just a pro tip, you don't want to hit that Great Unclean one with just a fat pack of 6 Exalted 8-bound. You're not going to kill him. Unless your opponent rolls very poorly on his Feel No Pains, because it's going to get a 4 Feel No Pain. So you're going to want to hit him with multiple units. I actually ran into him a couple of times with 9 Exalted 8-bound and still couldn't kill him. I'd leave him like on 3 wounds, 1 wound, things like that, and then he auto-generates and heals next turn. So plink off some wounds, shoot him a little bit, and then charge him with a quarter of your army. All right. And then for the Blood God, when it comes to the Exalted 8-bound, this is actually amazing for them because they can pick a lot of different abilities, especially if you pick the one that gives you the Feel No Pain for higher resilience, because you do have an innate 6-up Feel No Pain, and then you'll get a 5-up Feel No Pain. So then when you get smacked back in return, especially if you're fighting a close combat specialist type of army, like Space Wolves, um, Dark Angels, or Custodes, and things like that, right? You're going to want to make sure that your models and your units survive. Especially Exalted 8-bound, they're very expensive. They're 15 points more than regular 8-bound, so you're going to make sure that they survive at all times. And Corn cares not, of course. If you have 3 CP, then use it, right? Throw 5-up Feel No Pain on the Exalted 8-bound for the Blood God, and then use Corn Cares Not, right? So those 2 will cost you 3 CP, and between the 2, you're going to be 9 impossible to kill with that 5-up Feel No Pain and -1 damage on the attacks that are coming in. So if you have a Custodes unit that's trying to smack you, which I want to say all of them except for the characters are damaged too from all of their blades, this is going to help you out a ton, right? Really going to matter in all of those games and make you super powerful. Now with the 8-bound, with the last 2 stratagems, you have the Blood Offering and the Apoplectic Frenzy, right? So first one is Blood Offering. The Blood Offering is basically sticky when you die, So that objective marker remains under your control even if no models within range of it until your opponent controls it at the start or end of any turn, right? So if your unit dies while they're sitting on an objective marker, and sometimes it be like that, right? But you don't want it to get to that type of situation, right? You need to be hiding your 8-bound units. It shouldn't be them that's dying on an objective marker, holding an objective marker. But if you need to, and you want to ensure, because you're going second and or first, right? And you're going into your turn, and it's your opponent's turn, and you're going second, and you want to ensure you survive for the next turn, so you can go in and charge, and then do your blessings rolls, things like that. You can definitely pop the blood offering for one CP, so you can hold that objective marker. That way, also you're holding primary mission points, right? So you're holding primaries for your turn, and you're going to have the ability to actually get those points. Of course, if your opponent doesn't take it away, right? So this is going to have to be something like you got killed in the shooting phase, not in the fight phase, right? And then you're going to be able to sticky that and hold that objective into your turn, so you can continue to get those primary points, which is really important. So I use this stratagem a lot. Not for these particular units, either A-bound or Exalted, but I use this stratagem a lot for a lot of different units. I try not to put my 8-bound units in that type of situation to have to use this. I don't think I've ever done it except for once, where I had some pesky elves. They were shooting me from flanks and things like that. And I had just first started using 8-bound. I was still a nub to it all. So I ended up using it once. But most of the time, you don't have to use it on these particular units. But the apoplectic frenzy, right? You're going to use this a lot on either your 8-bound or the next one we're going to talk about. Auto advancing 6 is very, very strong, especially when you already have a scout move that you've used. Scout 6 specifically with 8-bound, right? Where we talked about that 23-inch movement, and either you rolling a 6 or you having an automatic 6 to your advanced roll. That's coming from this stratagem right here, what I was talking about earlier, right? The apoplectic frenzy. So very strong, 23 inches. Is basically in anyone's deployment zone, unless they're scooted all the way to the back, which if they're smart, they're going to do that. They know that world eaters are very, very fast and can reach out and touch you immediately. So these two stratagems are very, very good. You use them in the right situations. Like I said, blood offering, you use it in the shooting phase most of the time, or even in the Overwatch phases where your opponent can overwatch you and you were sitting on an objective marker and you were trying to go somewhere else or whatever it might be, right? Um, that way, you can ensure that you're holding that objective marker, and the apoplectic frenzy is very strong always. Most of the time, I don't use it on this unit. I use it on the big baddie, named Daddy Angron. But it's an amazing stratagem, 1 CP. Try it out. And on to the last page, where we're going to talk Exalted Eightbound with the last two remaining stratagems, the Blood Offering and Apoplectic Frenzy. Just like we were talking about with the Eightbound, Blood Offering is going to be the same thing, right? Most of the time, if you have the Feel No Pain up, this unit is not going to die. You're going to end up having like one guy on one wound, which is probably better if you die and you just sticky that objective marker. But things happen, and you're going to end up in that position. So the blood offering is just going to be the same thing as it was for the 8-bound. The apoplectic frenzy, this is going to be very good for this unit because a lot of the times they're not going to get the scout move, maybe one of them, because you're either going to take the Lord Invocatus or you're not going to take them. I know I'm going to a team tournament very soon, and I have actually removed Lord Invo from my list of units to take. I wanted to try out, make it more challenging for me because I am not the type of person to Uga Bunga and hit you in the first turn, right? I want to stage all of my units to basically cover the mid board and attack everything second, third rounds, things like that, and use the advancing charges later on. I really want to do sustained hits, right? Advancing charge and sustained hits. So I'm already there. I don't need that +2 movement. I really try to stage my units for all of that. I don't need the +2 and the advancing charge. That's just being a little greedy. You're trying to get out there, and you're only going to get maybe 1 to 3 units like that, depending how much scout moves you have, how closely your opponent deploys on his deployment or her deployment zone, right? So I try to stage mid board, execute those combats efficiently, and use Apoplectic Frenzy in that stage, right? Second or third turn. So I'm going to get in there, get stuck in there very quickly, and start smacking units around. So, yeah, this is the last page, and I hope you enjoyed it all. Thank you so much to everyone who participated and watched the show. Thank you for your support as always. Hopefully, I was able to break down a great strategy session on 8-bound and Exalted 8-bound to you, the participants who played the World Eaters. As always, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget, Onslaught Gaming 40K, where victory is just a strategy away. And most importantly, burn, maim, kill, blood for the blood god. Ah!